Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. So I hope you guys have revised the concepts last week and was able to figure out the mock also. How many of you have given the mock last week?
Ma'am, I have a doubt. Can I raise regarding the
Yes.
mock only? Ma'am, the question number 14. It was a magistrate commits a case to the court of session but later realizes that an essential procedure step 1, section 232(1). Ma'am, I had marked the first option, but in the solution also it's showing it was the first option, but in the on the green sign it has been done wrong, and ma'am उसमें लिखा है reopen the committal proceedings in the magistrates court. And one question was
That
this, sir,
might be a technical error.
and
That
ma'am,
might
one
be a
more,
technical. Yeah.
and one more question was there. Which section in the BNSS allows the magistrate to take cognizance of an offence upon receiving a complaint? Ma'am, I marked section 210, clause 1, clause A, subclause A, and it is the right one. But again, it has been marked wrong, and uh, but in the solution, it's showing the right one.
Yeah, so 210(1)(a) is the provision for cognizance on complaint by the magistrate. So you are right, but then there might be a technical error. I'll speak with
And
sir.
ma'am, in both the question, only question number 14 and 15.
Okay, I'll speak with
Oh,
sir, and then we'll on the portal we'll get this corrected.
okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so let's start with today's class because there is a lot to
Ma'am,
cover today. Yes.
I also have one doubt. There was a question that if the accused asked the magistrate to provide a detailed order of committal, so what should the magistrate do? So I marked, as you said in class, that the magistrate can do so and write a detailed order of committal. But the answer that is shown right here is that magistrate is not required to provide detailed reason for the committal.
Uh, See, if the magistrate is doing it on his discretion, that is his call. But that is not mandatory and that is not mentioned under section 232 anywhere under the committal proceedings, right? So
Yes.
general rule is that the magistrate is not bound to do that because it is not mandatory under the provisions of BNSS. But then if he wishes to do that, or and if he because of any circumstances of the case or because of any reasons behind the case, and that was there in the Arushi Talwar's case, because that was one of the leading and a very controversial case. So he gave a very detailed order, so nobody can you know strike that order off because of the fact that the court is giving the detailed order on the cognizance. Okay, so always mark the general provisions only, not the exception cases.
Okay, ma'am.
I hope everything is clear. I hope the differences between committal and submission is clear. If not, if still anybody has any doubt, in today's class, we are going to have a lot of bare act reading, and we are going to see a lot of situations where committal is taking place and submissions are taking, not submissions but committals are taking place. That is why I found it necessary to make you understand committal and submissions before moving on with the proper investigation, inquiry and trial, and before moving on with the cognizance wala pura area. So let's move ahead. Last week we studied about section 210. I wanted to tell you one thing, that how to remember section 210 first of all. Just a second. Yes. So section 210 1A is cognizance on complaint. 210 1B is cognizance on police report, and 210 1C is what? Cognizance on information. We call it cognizance on information, but it is actually the cognizance on like the information received by the police officer or the information like seen or perceived by the magistrate himself. Clear? So this, the way to remember it is CPI. This is the shortcut of remembering section 210 clause wise, because this is one of the provisions which is really important. Even if you forget the provisions of committal and submissions and you know, remember the concept of it, then it will be like, you'll be able to make it up. But then, if you do not remember the provisions of this particular cognizance concept, it might cause you a problem. There might be a question from one of the provisions also. So CPI is the code to learn it: complaint, police report, and information. Okay. So last time we studied that who can take cognizance? Who can take cognizance under section 210? Don't look at the Bare Act.
Ma'am, it is magistrate for class first
Which-
and class second.
Okay. Okay. So class second under one situation, and it is generally which magistrate who can take cognizance?
Magistrate class
First
one.
class, ma'am.
Yes. So it is the magistrate JM first. No area is mentioned here. So it is interpreted, the interpretation of section 210 is obviously the meaning of section 210 is that any magistrate of the first class can take at least the cognizance. So let's figure it out again. The FIR is filed. The police report is sent. Then what happens? Cognizance is taken. Then what happens? Come on, guys. We have studied it all. After cognizance, what
Issue
happens?
of process. Issue of process.
Inquiry by the magistrate.
Yes, it is under the inquiry, and then
Documents.
documents are given to the accused, charges are framed, and the trial begins. Here the trial begins. Before this, as soon as the charges are framed, the trial begins, and before that, this is investigation. From here, this is the inquiry. We'll study about it in detail today. Now, the point is that any magistrate of first class can take cognizance here. Any magistrate at least can take cognizance, and then he can either transfer the case, or he can either commit the case to the court of session, or because of the lack of jurisdiction, he can transfer the case to any other judicial magistrate. So it all comes after taking the cognizance. Till the cognizance stage, any judicial magistrate of the first class can take cognizance. Clear? Then magistrate of the second class, if you'll read the Bare Act, specially empowered in this behalf, may take cognizance of an offense by the chief judicial magistrate. If you'll read 210 clause 2, it is mentioned that it is the CJM who can only give the permission to JM class 2, and then only he can take cognizance, otherwise not. Okay. But here, the JM2 has to be competent because of the reason CJM will only give such cases where JM2, the competency of those cases where the JM2 is competent to try. Can somebody tell me how much punishment a JM2 can inflict? Imprisonment?
Up to 1 year.
Fine?
Ma'am, 10K,
10,000.
10,000.
Good. Okay. So this is the limit to punish. And where is it mentioned that which offenses he's competent to try?
Section 6, ma'am.
Schedule.
Okay.
Column 6. Okay. Wahi se we'll derive that any magistrate is competent to try. Then the CJM will transfer any case or ask the JM2 to take the cognizance. Now, the most important question, this is the simple Bayer Act interpretation, and this was even mentioned under the Bayer Act. Now, the major question is, what if the judicial magistrate first class takes cognizance without complying section 210? Because it is very easily to, it is very easy to see that who can take cognizance and on what conditions a judicial magistrate first class and second class can take cognizance. But the point is seeing the pattern of CLAT and seeing the pattern of, every exam and the questions are not very much centric around Bayer Act. So they tend to ask such questions where the procedure, the code of procedure or the BNSS remains silent. So what happens if the JM first class takes cognizance without complying the order of section 210? So it is mentioned under section, if you look at the new section, the old sections were, okay, I'm not going to tell you the old sections, I'm only going to tell you the newer one. The new sections are 506. 506 of BNSS. So basically, what happens here is section 506, if I scroll down, if somebody has the old Bayer Act, it is 460 of CRPC. 460 of CRPC and 506 of BNSS. So 506 and 507, basically these are the two sections of 460 and 461 are the two sections which tell us about if what happens if any irregularity, because see, the judges are also human beings. What if they commit an error? So there are some irregularities or there are some errors which do not vitiate the proceedings, which are not such grave in nature, which are not such serious in nature that can cause the proceedings to be vitiated. What do you mean by vitiated? That means the proceedings to be cancelled. The whole trial, the whole investigation, the whole procedure will begin from day one, from the very inception of it. And the accused will be acquitted if the proceedings are vitiated. So we have to understand, so if this is the consequence of an error, so we'll have to understand that how we cannot ignore these errors. So under section 506 or 460, some points are mentioned where the proceedings are not vitiated. That means the proceedings are not cancelled. But 461 or 507 contains those points which are very grave in nature, and as a result, if the errors are such which can vitiate the proceedings. So, coming to section 210 again, if you see clause E of section 506, if a magistrate or any of the magistrate, if even the JM first or JM second takes cognizance under section 210(1)(a) and 210(1)(b, the proceedings, and it is proved that it was taken in good faith, then the proceedings will not be vitiated. The proceedings will not be vitiated. What is 210(1)(a)?
Complaint,
Complaint
cognizance on basis of complaint.
Okay, and what is 210(1)(b?
On basis of
Police
police
report.
report.
So, on the basis of these, under these two cases, if the JM, any class JM, if JM1 or JM2, specially empowered by magistrate, especially empowered by the CJM, takes cognizance erroneously in good faith, then the proceedings will not be vitiated. Because if a police report is submitted to a magistrate, JM first, if he takes cognizance on it, erroneously believing that he can do so, but then he realizes that the court, the case, the punishment of the case is more than, the offense is more than 7 years. He committed to CJM. He took it in good faith. The proceedings will not be vitiated. Same goes with JM2. Later on, it comes to the JM second's knowledge that the punishment which is necessary to be inflicted is more than 3 years. He committed to the CJM or submitted to CJM, not committed, but submitted to CJM. Then the proceedings will not be vitiated. This is the whole procedure of it. But on the other hand, if the same thing happens under 210(1)(c), reason behind that is there is a chance of the magistrate getting bias. Before beginning the subject, I told everyone that this subject is based upon the principles of natural justice. One of the principles of natural justice is rule against biasness. So the procedure cannot be biased. So if a magistrate sees an offense himself and he himself takes cognizance on it erroneously, in that case, no if and but, and if it is resulting in failure of justice, which it will be, because it is somehow it is not supporting the purpose of CRPC or BNSS, then under clause C of subsection 1 of 210, if the magistrate takes cognizance erroneously, or maybe if the JM2 takes cognizance even without empowered by the CJM. He was not told by the CJM to take cognizance, and then he take cognizance on any information received, either by himself or by the police, then the proceedings will be vitiated. The proceedings will be void altogether. So this is really important. Nobody is going to ask you what will happen if on a complaint case the magistrate take cognizance erroneously, or if a JM2 is especially not empowered by CJM on police report, if he takes cognizance, what will be the result? The question which is tricky here is that if a JM second takes cognizance even without told by the CJM, because it is mentioned that only the CJM can empower JM to take cognizance on any of the cases. But if he does that, suo motu on information because of clause C 210(1)(c), then the proceedings will be vitiated altogether. One more aspect of it is, if you remember in the last class, I told you that if there is also one check imposed on the power of taking cognizance suo motu 210(1)(c), that if the accused wants, if it is the wish of the accused that the case should be transferred to any other magistrate who is competent to try the case shall be transferred. Remember?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So it is also one of the checks which is imposed on section 210, which was mentioned under 211, if you remember. So that check, this section, when a magistrate take cognizance of an offense under clause C of subsection 1 of 210, that means on information received either by himself or through any police officer, the accused shall, he should be informed that he has a right to get the case transferred. And even the inquiry or the trial, any of the cases, any of the situations can be transferred to any other magistrate. And if he says yes, then the magistrate, before the magistrate take cognizance, the case shall be transferred. Right? And the magistrate should be specified by the CJM. CJM should specify the magistrate. If an error occurs here, then what? If the magistrate does not transfer the case and takes cognizance even after the accused said yes, that I want to shift the case, because you yourself saw the offense and you will be obviously biased. I do not want the trial to be conducted by you. If the accused says yes, or there is one more situation, that if the magistrate does not even inform the accused that he has such right, that the case can be transferred to any other magistrate, then what?
It not be vitiated under section 507.
It is not mentioned under 506 and 507. The proceedings will be vitiated, because again, there is a failure of justice, because this is a huge, like the old section was 465. Under section 465, the proceedings will be vitiated. The new section is 511. Don't remember the number of the section. Just remember that, yes, the proceedings will be vitiated, and the heading of the section is finding or sentence when reversible by reason of error, omission, or irregularity. That means it is a provision, it is a residuary provision. The cases which are not mentioned under 506 and 507 are to be treated under, which was it? 511. 511 was it, right? Yes, 511. So yes, the proceedings will be vitiated, because this is actually causing the failure of justice. The only factor why the provisions are framed in such a manner is the failure of justice. Because obviously the magistrate who himself has taken cognizance, himself has seen the offense, or himself has taken the cognizance on his information based upon his knowledge, then if he goes on with the trial of the case, the proceedings will be biased on, because of some reason or the other, the proceedings will be biased. He will not be treating the evidences the manner he has to treat when he has not seen the offense himself or he has not received any information on the basis of his own knowledge. I hope this is clear. This was one aspect of 210 which was remaining in the last class, which
Ma'am,
was
what does JM1 have to do in order for it to be coming under 4507 to be vitiated? What irregularity does JM1 have to do there?
so if the JM first, so first irregular, acha 507 you are asking. So the JM first takes the cognizance of the case. On his own knowledge. Okay. Knowing the fact that the case was punishable with more than 7 years. It was not under his jurisdiction. He did it erroneously. If he does that under clause C, and because of the information was received by a person other than a police officer or on his own knowledge, then the proceedings will be vitiated. If he does that because of on a police report or on a complaint, police report as in the information received by the police officer, or on a complaint, the complaint file before a magistrate. If he does that because on these two grounds, he takes cognizance or erroneously, then the proceedings will not be vitiated.
वो थर्ड वाला में विजिटेड हो जाएगा.
Third wale mein, if the magistrate takes cognizance erroneously, any magistrate, the proceedings will be vitiated.
उसमें अगर कॉन्फिडेंस लेना तो मैं परमिशन लेना पड़ेगा सीजीएम से.
Repeat करो एक बार.
अगर जो थर्ड वाला है इंफॉर्मेशन वाला उसमें अगर कॉन्फिडेंस को लेना तो सीजीएम से परमिशन लेना पड़ेगा.
सिर्फ JM सेकंड को परमिशन लेना पड़ेगा.
JM1 को.
JM first can take cognizance. JM first can take cognizance on information also. Information cases में suo moto, the JM first can take cognizance suo moto also. But
Okay.
if he does that erroneously, then the proceedings will be magistrate vitiated. And if JM second takes cognizance erroneously, then the proceedings will be vitiated.
Okay.
So this was one aspect of section 210, which was not covered in the last class. Okay. I hope it is visible. Can somebody read section 506 and 507 ka the relevant clauses K and I again for better clarity? You can open 460 and 461 in your Bear Act if somebody has the old Bear Act. If you guys have the new Bear Act, then you can go ahead with 506 and 507. 506 ka clause E.
506. Irregularities which do not vitiate proceedings. If any magistrate not empowered by law to do any of the following things, namely clause E, to take cognizance of an offence under clause A or clause B of subsection 1 of section 210. Section 507, irregularities which vitiate proceedings. If any magistrate.
Wait. The last line also, erroneously in good faith, does that thing. The last line, after
Okay.
clause
Erroneously in good faith does that thing, his proceeding shall not be set aside merely on the ground of his not being so empowered. Section 507, irregularities which vitiate proceedings. If any magistrate not being empowered by law in this behalf does any of the following things, namely, clause K takes cognizance of an offence under clause C of subsection 1 of section 210, this proceeding shall be void.
Yes. So that was about the one more aspect of the 210. Let's move ahead with making over of the cases. This is a very small concept. It is not very complicated as the concepts of submissions and committal particularly. It is under section 212 of the new law. If somebody has the old law, then it is under section 192. So this is section 212. Any CJM, and this is the same section, like there is no change in this particular section even after the BNSS. So you can just write, like no need to remember the section number also. Just read the section and understand the concept of making over, and that's it. If any CJM may, after taking cognizance of an offence, make over the case for inquiry or trial to any competent magistrate subordinate to him. Any magistrate of the first class empowered in this behalf by the CJM may, after taking cognizance of an offence, make over the case for inquiry or trial to such other competent magistrate as the CJM may, by general or special order, specify, and thereupon such magistrate may hold the inquiry or trial. It simply means going down. Making over simply means going down. That is the only thing you need to remember. And the other thing you need to remember is, this is the old. Other thing you need to remember is that the JM's making over is simply going down. A person is, a magistrate is giving the, like delegating, you can even write the word delegation. Delegation always happens when you delegate something to be done subordinate to you, right? You cannot delegate something to someone who's superior to you. So it always happened this way, going down. So it simply says that any CJM can delegate, or maybe you can, the legal word is making over. Any CJM may make over the case to the JM competent, and any JM first class empowered by CJM may make over the case to any magistrate which CJM may specify. Usually it is this way: CJM, JM first, and then the JM second. But here the check of CJM is applied. So this is very simple. This is just going downwards. The only catch here is after taking cognizance. So whenever, again, FIR is filed, the police report is submitted, then what happens? The court take cognizance, and after this, till the judgment is pronounced, the CJM may at any time give the case to any magistrate below him, to try and inquire the case moving ahead. Clear? Yes.
Out here. So, if the CJM is making over a case already after taking cognizance to magistrate of first class, then why is there a need for the magistrate of first class to again make over it to another magistrate? I don't
So-
find the need of clause 2.
Yes, so for example, practically what happens, the cognizance is always taken by the JM first, right? Usually the cognizance is always taken by the JM first. So he takes the cognizance. He thinks that the case, the punishment of the case is more than 7 years. He gives it to the CJM, submits it to the CJM. Because he thinks that this is not a case where the CJM, like the CJM can punish. It is up to 7 years, but beyond 3 years. So there's no need to commit it to the court of session, but submission would suffice. So he gives it to the CJM, submits it to the CJM. The CJM thinks that the punishment was up to 7 years, and this can be very fairly tried by the JM first. He can make it over. In some cases, the CJM can also take cognizance, because I told you that CJM is one of the persons. Yes, I'm coming to you, Nimisha. CJM is one of the persons out of the judicial magistrates only, one of the judicial magistrates only. If the CJM takes cognizance of the offense and he thinks that the offense is punishable, or maybe the offense is not, like, even if he can, like, for example, you understand it this way, the GM first can punish up to 3 years. The CJM can give punishment up to 7 years. Just a random example. If a case comes to JM first, which is the minimum punishment of it is 5 years. Obviously, there's no if and but. He'll have to commit it to the court of session or submit it to the CJM. Generally, he'll submit it to CJM because it is under the jurisdiction of CJM. But it is not vice versa. If the case is within the jurisdiction of CJM and it is punishable up to 7 years. So obviously, the punishment can be either 1 year, 2 year, or maybe 3 years. And if the CJM thinks that JM first can try the case, he can move ahead with trying the case. Even if the punishment is 1 year, 2 year, or 3 years, it is not mandatory on the CJM to make over the case. JM first cannot go beyond the case after taking cognizance if the punishment is more than 3 years, because it is not under his limit to give punishment more than 3 years. But CJM can inflict a punishment of 1 year also. 1 year also, 2 years also. But then, if the CJM thinks that why should I usually, it is the only practice that why should I go on with the case? I have a lot to do. So he will make it over to the GM first. Yes, Nimisha.
Ma'am, I had a doubt. Ma'am, there are a lot of cases when the High Court sends back a case to the lower courts for the magistrates to try it. So, ma'am, will that also be called making over a case?
That is transfer of cases. Transfer of cases. We studied it in the last class. Which section was it? Can somebody tell me? Transfers by the High Court.
48, ma'am. 448.
447.
48.
Sure. Please look at the Bear Act again. The new and the old. I just wanted the old, like, you don't have to remember the section. I was just asking because you need to write like how much you are revising and how much you have noted the things down in your Bear Acts, in your notebook.
I'm in section 447.
It is 447. Okay. So the High Court, yes, Parvez.
Ma'am, I have a small doubt with regarding to the making over. Ma'am, the clause 2 of section 212, it says that any magistrate of the first class so and so, so and so. And then, ma'am, should the magistrate then again take the permission of the chief judicial magistrate before further delegating it to another magistrate?
Which magistrate should take the permission of CJM? Any magistrate should take the permission. Is your doubt?
No, ma'am. So clause 2 says that any magistrate of the first class empowered as per section 212 clause 1 can further delegate it to another magistrate. Right.
He cannot further delegate or further make over to the magistrate. The CJM will specify the name of the magistrate to whom the proceedings should be made over for inquiry and trial. So, for example, if the JM first take cognizance of an offense whose punishment is 1 year or maybe 6 months, he comes to the CJM and says, like, this is not my domain. I have a lot of other tasks to do. So let's make this case over to send this to JM second. So CJM will specify either any JM first is JM second is there, because a lot of states has retained the position of JM second, as I told you in the beginning of the classes also. So if any JM second is there or not, if any JM second has the bandwidth to take the case ahead or not, or any other judicial magistrate can take the case ahead for inquiry and trial. Yes, Sayak.
I have a doubt. So, with regard to making over, first the JM1 submits the case to CJM to see whether or not. Okay.
No submission happening here. No submission
So,
happening.
so
Just
after so JM1 takes cognizance of the offense, or CJM takes cognizance.
see, if the CJM these are two different situations. If the CJM takes cognizance of the offense, he will directly make it over to JM first if the situation is such. Okay. He will not require any permission. If the JM first takes cognizance of an offense, he will require permission of CJM, not submission. Permission of CJM to make it over to any other JM first or JM second.
Initially you gave the
No, just a second. Empowerment is the word, not the word permission is used, but it is actually means that the CJM should be in loop. Yes, go ahead.
Ma'am, initially you gave the example of because you said JM1 is the one usually taking cognizance of cases. So they usually submit it to CGM and the CGM then makes it over to another JM1. So is it a necessity that always a JM1 has to take cognizance and submit, or is it just an example that you?
That was just a random example. That was just a situational example where the punishment was minimum 7 years. So obviously 3 to 7 years, for example. Or maybe 2 to 7 years. If the punishment is 2 years to 7 years, there can be a lot of commutation combinations there, but that it is not necessary. If it is coming across that submission is necessary, then no, submission is not necessary. So if an offense is punishable from 2 years to 7 years, and the JM first takes cognizance of an offense, JM first thinks that this offense will be minimum punished with 5 years. He will submit it to CJM. 99%, under 99% cases, CJM will try the offense himself. But under 1% of the case, in such case, if he thinks that this offense, after appreciating the evidences and after looking at the case, if he thinks that the punishment should not be 1 year and this is taking a lot of time and bandwidth of mine, he can make it over to JM without even taking the JM first or any other JM first, for the matter of fact. If not this JM, if suppose this he's X, he's Y, he can commit it to Y. That please you go ahead with the trial of the case. I have a lot of other things to do. So this is just
In
the
this
thing.
case, if the offense is above 3 years, then can the CJM make it over to JM1 if it is above 3 years or less than 7 years?
No, he'll not. He'll not, because there's no point of making it over to JM first, no? He'll not be able to give punishment of it.
So if the offense is between 2 to 7 years, and if JM1 takes cognizance and then files that it is like 5 years, so he makes it over to CJM. Now if submits it to CJM. Now if CJM finds that it is less than 3 years, so he will then make it over to JM1.
He may do it.
But here, don't you think that JM1 is making an irregularity because he is making it over to, he's submitting it to CJM without knowing that the offense should be between 2 to 7 years. So CJM is then, so it's an irregularity, don't you think?
He's doing it in good faith.
Okay.
The word good faith is a very big word if you look at section 506 and 507, 506 particularly. So it is actually not an irregularity per se. It is after considering everything, if he thinks that yes, the offense is the accused has to be punished with more than 3 years, he's submitting it to CJM. But then if a situation comes where new evidence comes in, and where the new witnesses come in, where the CJM thinks that the guilt of the burden and the guilt of the accused is shifted, and the accused is almost innocent, then what? So for example, if A has committed the murder of B, till the JM first was trying the offense, the advocates of A were not able to prove that A was mentally unfit when he committed the murder of B. So because of this particular, murder hoga to he'll give it to the sessions court. So for example, he committed theft. JM first is trying the case. Then after seeing the things, he thinks that yes, the punishment should be grave. He committed theft with some of the aggravated things also, like he knocked the door open, broke the lock, broke the window, broke the door. So all those sections will be added, and the punishment will obviously be more than 5 years. Then the magistrate thinks that this is not actually theft. A lot of other factors are also coming into the light of the case. Let's submit it to the CJM. CJM will take care of it. It will not go beyond 7 years, but CJM will take care of it. But then the advocates of A proved it in front of the CJM that he was mentally ill. Or maybe he is, like his birth certificate was saying something else in front of JM first, then the advocates of A produced a valid birth certificate which shows that he is 7 to 12 years old, between 7 to 12 years old. He'll get the exception of general exception. And if he gets such exception, he will be acquitted. Acquitted means nothing. He will be set free. Nothing can be done against him then. Then in such case, if such factors arise at the later stage of the case, CJM may make it over. I'm just giving you an example for better clarity. This kind of complicated cases will not come into the picture, like from the point of view, this is not important from the point of view of exam. But since you guys had doubts, that is why I gave you this example. Okay. Now
Okay, ma'am.
a lot of things will be clear. So a case should never be considered as in the isolation of it. Like this is the offense. Okay, this is the punishment. he is the person to try the case. A lot of other things also arise in the later stages of the case or even during the proceedings of the case. So it depends upon the circumstances. And then also, if JM first has taken cognizance of the case and he knows that these are the factors and the punishment may go beyond 5 years, and then also he keeps trying the case, then it is an irregularity. Getting the point? So to conclude it and sum it up, what you guys need to know is, and what you guys need to write down is, 212 is making over the case. And yes, I was answering the question of High Court. If High Court sends a case, transfers a case, we call it transfer a case to any lower court, the word which will be used will always be making over. So yes, I was about to come to that. When the doubt was asked, and when the High Court will send a case or transfer a case to Session Court, what will be the word? Guys, come on. What will be
Committal.
the word? Yes. For Session Court, the word is always committal. For sending it or transferring it to someone lower than the authority of that particular court is always making it over. So this way you can always remember C and S are upwards and M is downwards. So making it over is always going downwards. Committal and submissions are always upwards. 212 making over the case. CJM can make over the case anytime after cognizance of an offense, after taking cognizance of an offense, to any judicial magistrate, then any other magistrate after taking cognizance of an offense may make over the case to any magistrate specified by CJM and underline that this power of making over, this is JM first, not any magistrate, making over has to be empowered by CJM. This is all you have to remember. Any magistrate of first class. This is all you have to remember for making over the case. Yes.
I had a doubt. So, wouldn't CJM be making it over to a magistrate of first class or after taking cognizance? Then why does in clause 2 it again mentions that any magistrate of the first class after taking cognizance? Because if it is made over to a JM1, isn't it already assumed that cognizance has been taken? Why do they have to take cognizance again?
So these 2 points are 2 different situations. Don't interlink these 2 situations together. So second, if you elaborate the second situation, under second situation, the JM first takes cognizance at the very first place. There's no role of CJM under second situation. If JM first takes cognizance of an offense and he thinks that this has to be tried by the JM second, then this has to be empowered by the CJM. This is as simple as that. Don't connect it with clause 1. Clause 1 simply says that any CJM, if takes cognizance of an offense, he can give it to the judicial magistrate if he thinks that the offense is of such a nature. That's all.
Ma'am, I also had another small doubt. Ma'am, you earlier mentioned that transfer by a high court to a court of session is also called committal. But then you also told that, I mean, we've been taught that committal and submission is always done to a higher court. So why is it still called committal when it is given by
Okay.
HC to a lower?
Committal and submission will always be done to the higher court, but then if anybody transfers a case, the transferring of the word which will be used will be committal and submission. It will not come under 323 232, or I think it is 364, right? The normal
Ma'am.
section, the new sections of committal and submission. If somebody can tell me the new sections of submission and committal.
It's 364 for
364.
submission, ma'am,
364, ma'am.
and 232
362
for
and
committal.
364.
Yes, ma'am.
It will not come under 362 and 364. The power of High Court to commit or submit the cases. The power of committal and submission mentioned under these three sections will always be upward, and mentioned under 212, the making over will always be downwards. But whenever we are transferring a case to the court of session, the word which will be used is committal. If you read section 464 of the new law, I told you that the word committal is used there. Right? In the last class, we read the section 464. 464 was it? 447 it was. 447 of the new law. 407 of the new law, of the old law. So if you'll read section 447, transfer by the High Court. Yes, coming to you, Nimisha. That any particular case be committed for trial to a court of session. High Court can commit any case for trial to court of session. Still, committal is used. Yes, Nimisha.
Ma'am, under section 212 clause 1, it says any CJ may after taking cognizance of an offence. So does this refer to the cases that are taken up by the CJM after it is submitted to it? Because it is not a court of original jurisdiction, so it can only try a case after it
Not
is.
of court of original jurisdiction.
Ma'am, so it can only try a case when it is submitted to it.
Okay.
So, ma'am, why are we using the word cognizance here? Because it, in the first place, cannot take cognizance, except one exception.
Okay. So
That's
can
it.
somebody tell me that is the court of CJM not a court of original jurisdiction? Sayak, Rishabh.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am, as in?
Ma'am, CGM court is not the court of original jurisdiction.
CJM court is not the court of original jurisdiction. They cannot take cognizance directly.
No, CJM is the court of original jurisdiction because CJM is also a JM1.
Did I mention in the last class any time that CJM is not, like, CJM can always try such offenses which is submitted to them, which are submitted to them?
No, ma'am.
Ma'am, you did actually.
Yes.
So that's why I was also confused about this.
Who's mentioned it? I confused with court of session, ma'am. I'm sorry. I mentioned about the court of session. I don't think so. Like, please let me know if I mentioned it. Like, I checked the recordings. I don't have the recordings. If I mentioned it that CJM is not a court of original jurisdiction, court of session
No,
is
about court of
No, ma'am. You said High Court and Court of Session are courts of or are not courts of original jurisdiction.
Then also
You
they
didn't
have
say
some
CJM.
exceptions.
Yes, you did mention.
But CJM can take cognizance of offenses because CJM is one of, I always told that CJM is one of, suppose there are all these are JMs, judicial magistrates. Out of this, one person will be picked up by the High Court to be the CJM of that state, of that particular court. Clear? So there is no actual difference between JMs and CJMs. The only difference is the limits of punishments. And that is why the CJM, and the difference is wherever the supervision is required, then the CJM will come into the picture, and there it is mentioned under the various sections that when the empowerment of CJM is required. So GM second requires empowerment of CJM under 210 to take cognizance. Then CJM will empower the judicial magistrate to make over the case, of first class to make over the case. So then CJM will come into the picture. CJM can take that means the police report can be sent directly to the CJM also, which is usually not the practice, but the by the book, if we'll go, CJM, the police report can be sent to the CJM, or the complaint can directly be filed to the CJM or the CJM, because if you'll read section 210, it is mentioned that any magistrate and chief judicial magistrate is a magistrate. It is not mentioned that any magistrate of first class or second class. The only point here is High Court and Court of Session are not the court of original jurisdiction, which also have certain exceptions. 464 clause 3, 199. It is 222 of the new law, 222 of the new law. These are the exceptions of, you don't have to remember the section numbers, but just remember the exceptions. The High Court can transfer the case to himself. Under this situation, it is the court of original jurisdiction. Court of Session can take direct cognizance of cases where there is a case of defamation against certain authorities, like president, vice president of the country. You understand the seriousness of such cases where there is a defamation case against, defamation case against a person for the president of India, then the Court of Session can directly take the cognizance. This is the only one exception where the Court of Session is the court of original jurisdiction. Otherwise not. CJM can take cognizance on its own. Otherwise, it would have been mentioned under section 210 that CJM except CJM or any magistrate of first class or second class. Clear? I might have told you the usual practice of the courts, that usually the complaint is filed in front of a judicial magistrate first class only, or the police report is presented to a judicial magistrate first class only. This is the usual practice of the courts. Because why to surpass the authorities, right? But if it is filed in front of the CJM, he can take cognizance of the offense. Clear? Shall I move ahead then?
Ma'am, I have a doubt. In clause 2, does any magistrate mean only JM2 or does it include JM1 also? When JM1 is make
Section
clause 2.
212,
Yes, ma'am.
making over, you are asking.
Yes, ma'am.
The clause 2 means any magistrate of first class only. JM
Making over.
second किसे make over करेगा?
No, ma'am. I'm saying when JM1 is making over, can they only make over to JM2 or is JM1 included in that if they are empowered by
JM1 is included in that. If the CJM thinks fit. Because it is mentioned that any other magistrate as the
Yes,
CJM
ma'am.
thinks fit. So the JM first can, if the CJM empowers him, empowerment is the word. make over the case to any magistrate as the CJM thinks. So any magistrate can obviously be any other magistrate. Okay. So let's move ahead with the further proceedings and further chapters then. There was a case which was skipped. Harish, this is H. Chandra, Mani versus state of Jharkhand. This is AIR 2006 case. So what happened in this case was, just to make you understand that the cognizance cannot be taken, the only thing you need to remember is this, like write down is this held mere speculations, allegations, or suspicions cannot be the grounds for taking cognizance. This is all you need to write down. Nobody is going to ask you the facts, but in brief, I am going to give you the, like, explain you the situation, because it will be, easier for you to relate it to this particular finding. So what happened here is, don't write it down, like write just this one line down and look at your screens. What happened here was, so father filed a complaint against a man who was the man living with the wife of his son. So this father had a son who was killed. He filed a complaint against a man who was living with his son's wife. So there was a triangle here. Son, he had a wife, his father-in-law, and then he filed a complaint against his wife's, you can say, paramour. This can be the appropriate word. A man who used to live with the wife. So they were not married, but who used to live with the wife. So obviously this man had some, and his son had some problems with each other. That is very obvious. So the father filed a complaint against this particular man. Suppose his name is X. So he filed a complaint against X, and the basis of the complaint was that his son died because of poison. Because of poison. And why did he concluded that he died because of the cognizance? Because he vomited before his death, and his samples were not collected before his last rites. So the son, suppose son was cremated and the samples were not collected so that the things can be, or his post-mortem was not done, so that it was not clear that whether he was, at the post-mortem and the samples and everything is the procedure of trial. So on the mere speculation that the son vomited before the death, this is not an allegation which is directly leading it to that he was given poison. And because a lot of people vomit before dying, so this is just mere speculations, allegations and suspicions which cannot be the grounds for taking cognizance, and the court did not take cognizance because of this reason. The reasons were very obvious here because the situation of this particular connection was not very much favorable, and that's why the father filed the complaint. But there was no prima facie case, or there was no actual grounds of filing, of taking cognizance of the case. So I hope it is clear now. Nupur Talwar is also covered. Harish Chandra is also covered. The topic of cognizance is done. That does not mean we'll not be coming across cognizable and non-cognizable offenses. The starting of the topic of FIR is starting with cognizable offenses and non-cognizable offenses. So now can somebody tell me what are the cognizable offenses and what are the non-cognizable offenses? Come on, guys.
Cognizable offences are those offences which are mentioned under Schedule 1 of BNS and for which the police.
Yes,
Schedule 1
yes.
of
Please go on.
And for those offences, the police does not mandatorily needs a warrant for the arrest. But non-cognizable offences are those that are not in Schedule 1 and the police needs a warrant for the arrest.
Very good, very good, very good. So this is the actual definition which Nimisha just told everyone. For cognizable offenses, the police can arrest even without warrant. And those are mentioned under Schedule 1 of BNSS. I think column 4. Non-cognizable, on the other hand, the police has no authority to make an arrest without warrant. Okay? And these are also mentioned under Schedule 1. So there is no criteria actually to differentiate between cognizable and non-cognizable, particularly for the offenses of under BNS or IPC. Because CRPC regulates the procedure of BNSS, regulates the procedure of BNS, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, and other laws also. For other laws, it is very obvious and it is mentioned under Schedule 1 also. If you look at the Schedule 1, for other laws, more than 3 years, cognizable, more than less than 3 years, non-cognizable. If you look at the Schedule 1 last page, where
Ma'am, the Schedule 1 of BNS or BNSS?
BNSS, BNSS, Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, that means CRPC. More than 3 years, it is cognizable, and less than 3 years, non-cognizable. So understand it this way. For offenses under IPC or BNS, it is the Schedule 1 which decides the nature of the offenses, whether it is cognizable or non-cognizable. For other laws, you can draw this chart. For other laws, offenses more than 3 years, straight away cognizable. For offenses less than 3 years, straight away non-cognizable. If this would have been the criteria for IPC and BNS also, it would have been easier. But then, even after the reframing of laws, this is Schedule 1 of BNSS. BNSS. And this is also mentioned under Schedule 1 of BNSS only, Part 2, if I'm not wrong. It is Part 2. Just to validate it, I am telling you, yes, it is Part 2. Classification of offenses against other laws. Part 2. So this is the actual difference between cognizable and non-cognizable offenses. For non-cognizable offenses, for cognizable offenses, it is very obvious that an FIR is filed. A person sees the offense. If the person has an information of the offense, he'll run to the police station, obviously, or he'll call the police station or give it in the electronic form now. Police will find that, yes, it is a cognizable case. Police will file the FIR. But the same thing happens with a person, because a person is like a normal non-legal person, you can say. He does not know whether an offense is cognizable or not, whether even if this is an offense or not. He has no knowledge of it. He simply knows that this is the kind of offense this is something wrong which is going on. He might not even know the meaning of the word offense. He just knows that this is something wrong which is against the law. He'll run to the police station. Police will see that this is a non-cognizable offense. Police will file the non-cognizable report here. Full form of NCR. You might have heard it a lot during the courts. NCR की application चल रही है. NCR चल रहा है. NCR is nothing but the non-cognizable report. It is not mentioned, the word is not mentioned, even the direct mention of FIR is also not there. It is indirectly but somehow you can figure it out, yes, that section 173 of the new law or 154 of the old law, which is very important to remember. The only section which is important to remember here is 173. Just this. Otherwise, the whole procedure you need to remember, the whole concept you need to remember. Just this section you need to remember. 173, which is the section of FIR. If you read the heading of the section, you will be able to figure out that this is FIR, obviously. But the non-cognizable report, the sections of non-cognizable report is not clear.
173 of BNSS.
Yes, 173 of BNSS. I'm not mentioning the old laws now. Like even if I mention the old laws, it might be because I remember those sections and I need to look at the BEAR Act to even, because the new laws are not even a month old. Unka first birthday nahi hua hai abhi. First birthday will be after 3 days. So I also require time to, memorize each and every section. This I remembered because this is a very landmark section, 173. 154 is 173 now. So 173 you will have to remember. Even remember 154, a question can be framed from this particular thing, that because the questions will be new and the paragraphs will be old. The case laws will be old. If the case laws mention 154, that means it is 173 now. So remember this particular section, please remember the old and the new sections both. 154 has become 173, which is FIR. This is the only one section which I am going to ask you to remember both the section numbers. Otherwise, just some important sections are enough. 210, I'm not asking you to remember the old section. 210 is enough now. Clear till here? The NCR. Now, what is the purpose of differentiating between FIR and NCR? Because FIR के बाद भी investigation हो रही है, NCR के बाद भी investigation ही होगी. So what happens here is the police received an information of a non-cognizable offense. He records the NCR, the non-cognizable report. He has to send it to a magistrate before starting the investigation for his permission. Then the magistrate will order yes or no for investigation. If he says yes, then the investigation will take place in the same manner as then everything will be same. In all the other cases, the investigation will take place. The magistrate will take cognizance after the police report is filed to the magistrate. The magistrate will process the issue. Then the magistrate will send the documents. Charges will be framed, and then the trial begins. Clear? This is the non-cognizable report. And this is the actual concept of it. We'll read the section, but first I will explain about FIR. The difference between FIR. For FIR, an information of cognizable offense is received here. Police officer does not need a permission to even arrest without a warrant or even to start the investigation. Police will immediately start the investigation here. File the police report to the magistrate. Police will take to the magistrate. Magistrate will take cognizance of the offense, issue of process, then documents, charges, and then the trial will begin. This is FIR. Between this and FIR, the police has to lodge the FIR, which is mandatory if the FIR is meeting with certain factors, which I'm going to tell you that FIR should not be, obviously FIR ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए ना कि if I go to a police, if I call police abhi, if I just call the police station abhi and I tell them, I don't even mention my name, I don't even tell them the locality from where I'm calling, I just dial 100 and tell them murder ho gaya, murder ho gaya, murder ho gaya. Will they lodge the FIR on the basis of this particular, and then I cut the call, disconnect the call? Will they lodge the FIR?
No, ma'am, preliminary inquiry needs to be done.
Okay. Preliminary inquiry is actually a kind of discussion here because preliminary inquiry was not necessary before and was very vague under which cases preliminary inquiry has to be done. But then there are a lot of changes under the new CRPC, the new BNSS, where they have specifically mentioned under which cases the preliminary inquiry has to be done. Usually the preliminary inquiry is not required, but usually the FIR has to be descriptive in nature. Always remember, FIR has to be descriptive in nature and not cryptic in nature. This is one of the very landmark cases where a lot of other things are also being held. I'll let you know. We'll be going through the case of Lalita Kumari in detail. Lalita Kumari versus Government of UP. FIR should be descriptive in nature and not cryptic in nature. As though anybody will call anyone, the police, anytime and tell them 100 different kinds of stories. But everything is not an FIR. This will not be like, the police will not even consider this, and they will just dial the number again for confirmation, and that redialing is not a preliminary.
Ma'am, in this situation, we need an informant, the first informant who will
Exactly.
go to the
Exactly.
police station.
Exactly. Anonymous FIR is no FIR. Reason is because when the FIR will be filed by person M, if FIR is filed by the person M, suppose, this M will have to be produced before the court as a prosecution witness. If the person is anonymous, the police will not file an FIR, but police, what will police do? What will police do? Police will file a complaint to a magistrate, and he will be a complainant himself. If he thinks that, this is a very rare situation, if he thinks that why police will file a complaint, Indian police stations are not even ready to file the genuine FIRs, and when they'll be randomly receiving some information anonymously, they will just not even think about it twice. So this is not a natural phenomena. This is not a usual practice. Police will not even think about it. The general rule is, the only thing you need to remember is that the court needs a prosecution witness. That is the reason the person has to tell his whereabouts and his name and details. So a person who's anonymously giving some information, that information cannot be lodged as an FIR. Which is only in books. That means, yes, usually this is, we all know that rules. Yes, we all know that what is the situation of the country and why there was a need. Actually, if I talk about the first and the foremost reason of reframing all the three laws, what I think, this is my personal opinion, and this is one chapter 12, sorry, chapter 13 now. Chapter 12 was the older chapter of CRPC. Chapter 13 of BNSS now, where all these things, investigation, all the things relating to investigation by police officer are mentioned. Because all the major changes are under this chapter only. Otherwise, the whole BSA, almost the whole IPC, apart from the punishments and some extra, the technologically bringing some advancements. Apart from that, the major reason of bringing the new laws were to control the police of the country, to put a check upon them. Because the situations were getting the encounters, the rate of encounters, the genuineness of the encounters, and the non-registering of FIRs, the situations of the rural areas, the situations of making people suffer to go from one area to other area, because this police station does not have jurisdiction, then you go to this police station does not have jurisdiction, then you go to this police station. So because of all these things and because of the huge corruption going on in the organ of police of the country. I think this is the major reason why we have the new laws. This is my opinion because I've been reading the whole procedurals, and 99% of the changes I can find in chapter 12. There are a lot of changes under chapter 13 now. Investigation proceedings, there are a lot of changes. So that is why this is important, and that is why this becomes really important from the point of view of CLAT also and the concepts as such. Clear till here?
Ma'am, I have a
Yes, sir.
doubt. So with respect to non-cognizable report, when the magistrate says no, then that case gets dismissed there only, or the accused doesn't have the right to go further.
Yes, so we will be coming to that because we have to read the whole provision for it. So let's read the non-cognizable report wala provision and then we call it off. We'll not be going to the procedure of cognizable offenses because the time is already 8:32. So just let me show you the procedures in case of a. So this is FIR 174, which I told you to always remember. This is, oh sorry, this is 173. FIR, information in cognizable cases. This is FIR. This section you always have to remember. Then if we'll move ahead, no need to remember the section numbers. 174 is information as to non-cognizable cases and investigation of such cases. So this is combined. The procedure is combined and the information is combined. But for cognizable cases, the only thing which is mentioned, the information and investigation of cognizable cases are divided. But for non-cognizable cases, this is just one section, which is 174. No need to remember the section. Just remember that this is under the investigation section, the investigation chapter, and this is a part of the investigation. So let's read this section quickly before calling the class off. Can somebody look at the screen and read the section for me? I'll zoom it in.
Yes, ma'am, I can do that.
Okay. Yes.
Information as to non-cognizable cases and investigation of such cases. When information is given to an officer in charge of a police station of the commission within the limits of such station of a non-cognizable offence, he shall enter or cause to be entered the substance of the information in a book to be kept by such officer in such form as the state government may by rules prescribe in this behalf, and number 1, refer the informant to the magistrate. Number 2, forward the daily diary report of all such cases fortnightly to the magistrate. Clause 2. No police officer shall investigate a non-cognizable case without the order of a magistrate having power to try such case or commit the case for trial. Clause 3. Any police officer receiving such order may exercise the same powers in respect of the investigation, except the power to arrest without warrant, as an officer in charge of a police station may exercise in a cognizable case.
Wait, now wait. So these three clauses are very, simple, but the first clause has some changes. This fortnightly word was never used before in CRPC. So can somebody tell me what is this? What is the meaning of fortnight?
14 days.
2 weeks, 14 days.
Yes, in every 14 days. So it was never mentioned before under CRPC, but this new BNSS has bring this word. So in every 14 days, a daily report has to be sent. So whatever I told you, the first clause mentioned that only, that but within the local limits of such station. This is where the FIR and the non-cognizable report is getting differentiated, because when we'll read section 173, we'll understand that the restriction of area is removed now, and the concept of zero FIR has been new to the culture of police stations. Anybody can go anywhere and file the FIR according to the new law. But for non-cognizable offenses, it is still a situation that when information is given to the police officer of the commission within the limits of such station of a non-cognizable offense. So suppose a non-cognizable offense has been committed, the police station within the limits of offense can only record, like he'll only record the non-cognizable report. He shall cause to be entered the substance of the information in a book to be kept by such officer. This book is called the daily diary report, to be kept by such officer in such form as the state government may prescribe. Then he will refer the informant to the magistrate. Shall requirement hai yahan. This is mandatory. He will have to refer the informant to the magistrate and forward the day. This is new. This is newly added. Yahan tak pehle sab kuch sahi tha. But then now he has to send the daily report, which is maintaining daily diary report for the non-cognizable offenses in every 14 days, like in every 15th day to the magistrate. This can be the question, guys. The number of days. If somebody has the old BEAR Act, please note this down in your BEAR Act as clause 2. Like there were no clauses before, I think. There were no clauses. If I'm not wrong, were there any clauses in the old CRPC? This is 155 of old CRPC. If anybody is looking at the old law, this is 155. There were no clauses. Like there were no sub clauses of clause 1. There
Yes,
was
yes, yes.
There was only the first clause, which says that he has to refer the informant to the magistrate. Then under clause 2, which is very important, the police officer shall investigate a non-cognizable case. No police officer shall investigate a non-cognizable offense without the order of a magistrate having power to try such case or commit the case for trial. Okay. The magistrate will ask for the investigation, and if he does not give the order for the investigation, then the police cannot proceed ahead with the investigation. What will happen if the magistrate says that there is no need to investigate the case? We'll be dealing it further. But yes, this is the requirement here. Then police officer will have same powers as he has in the cognizable cases, except the power to arrest without warrant. He can still not arrest without warrant. Otherwise than that, all the powers of chapter 13 will be same as he is doing under a cognizable case. The last clause is, what if first case, like for example, there are 2 or more offenses. As I told you, there are a lot of factors under one case. So if there are 2 or more offenses, suppose murder with dacoity. The person went to commit dacoity and then killed the house owners. Then what? Then if this is just a random example, I think both the cases should be cognizable. But if the case is murder, and then section 511 of IPC, that was drinking and causing disturbance at a public place. If this section is also added with murder, then what? One is cognizable, other is non-cognizable. Then the whole case will be cognizable because of obvious reason we cannot treat murder, or we cannot consider a very grave offense to be a non-cognizable offense, and we have to give power to the police officer to treat it as a cognizable case and make arrest without warrant. This is about clause 4. Clear? If JM says no to the investigation, then section, let me tell you, 176 comes into the picture. All the procedures of 176, few last clauses, 2 and 3 will have to be followed. For example, I will be reading 176 when we'll be dealing cognizable cases, that the informant has to be informed that we are not going to investigate the case because there is no substance in the case, and the JM has said no. The only remedy the informant will have is to approach the High Court through writs. Or even the High Court can use the inherent powers which are provided under BNSS. So this is there. And yes, the case will be stopped. If no investigation, then obviously then the trial is not going to be proceeded ahead with, and the case will not be taken ahead. Because even the NCR report is filed, the non-cognizable report is sent, which is not holding the importance of FIR. As soon as the FIR is not equals to FIR, as soon as the FIR is filed in case of cognizable offense and the police report is sent to the magistrate, then the case is equal. Then the proceedings ahead are very similar. But the NCR and FIR are not equal in terms of value also.
Could you repeat it again?
The value of the non-cognizable report and the value of an FIR are not like very much similar to each other. That is why for non-cognizable report to be converted into a police report, it needs permission of a magistrate for investigation. For FIR, as soon as an FIR is filed, FIR is registered by the police officer. The moment the FIR is lodged by the police officer, investigation has to be started. We'll be dealing with section 175 and 173 and 174 tomorrow. Again, particularly we'll be dealing with 175, which is very important, and 173. 174 is almost done. 173 and 175 are remaining to conclude the concepts of FIR and non-cognizable report for non-cognizable offenses and cognizable offenses. But then there are a lot of facets in FIR. For example, whether the FIR can be challenged. If a police has filed the FIR, whether it can be challenged. If suppose the person, the informant comes to the police station after 3 years of the information, there is no limitation mentioned under any of the laws that yes, this is the actual time limit under which the police officer, the informant has to go to the police station to file the FIR. So what is the value of that FIR? What is the actual value of an FIR, evidentiary value, whether it can be produced in the court? Most importantly, why the FIR is given to the accused at a later stage. I always told you that after taking cognizance of an offense, I always told you the documents have to be given to the accused. But then when FIR is filed, when police report is filed, when cognizance is taken, then when the issue of process is done, then the documents are given to the accused. But it is mandatory. Accused को हम यहाँ पे document दे रहे हैं at this later stage. But it is mandatory to give the copy of the FIR to the informant at this stage only. It is mentioned under section 173. And even to the victim now. Victim also. But not to the accused. Isn't it like the principles, isn't it somehow the biasness being done with the accused? Because what if the accused has to file an application of bail here? Anticipatory bail? Or what if the accused has to file the application like after the cognizance, if the arrest has been taken, what if the accused has to file the application of bail here? He does not have even the copy of the FIR according to the... Yes. Go ahead.
Regular bail.
But how regular bail? The application of bail cannot be even drafted without the copy of the FIR. जब बंदे को पता ही नहीं है कि उसके
Yes,
against...
Ma'am, under section 207 priorly of CRPC, ma'am, it was we can go for having a copy of the FIR from the police station from the IO investigation officer prior to the...
This is after the issue of process, after cognizance. If you read 207 and 208, after the magistrate take cognizance of the offense, then the 207 and 208 can be complied with. Before taking cognizance, if the accused has to even, like the police report is filed, as soon as the FIR is filed, the police is investigating the case, the police is free to make arrest in the case of cognizable offenses. What if the accused has to file an FIR somewhere? It's accused has to file a bail application somewhere here before cognizance. Then what? Then there are some case laws. Then there are some rulings under which ऐसे तो नहीं चल रहा है system है ना? Accused को FIR तो मिल ही रही है तभी. Then only the bail applications are getting successful. So there are some case laws, particularly Lalita Kumari, which is talking about all the factors of FIR and the copy of FIRs. Then what if what is the situation in the case of multiple FIRs? Suppose the FIR is filed in you might know the example of, there was one show, AIB, on YouTube. Some of you might be knowing about the show. So that was one show on that was beyond the, or maybe you can take the example of Priya Prakash Warrior. Priya Prakash Warrior, that South actress who was who became viral at one point of time, I think 2-3 years before COVID. She became viral in one of the videos where she was winking to the other actor. She became like viral overnight. A lot of FIRs were filed against her that she is spreading that was not under the limits of obscenity under the Indian culture. So a lot of FIRs were filed against her in various states under various cities. So what is going to be the resolution there? That is also one of the facets of FIR. And the most important facets, because this is very common, which I'm going to tell you now, the most important situation which happens usually is cross FIRs. Cross FIRs means A filed an FIR against B filed an FIR against A. This is very usual. This is very common. What is the solution here? Which FIR is going to be treated as the FIR? Is it the first, or is it both FIRs going to be treated as the valid FIRs and the police is going to go ahead with the investigation? So all these things we are going to cover it tomorrow. Like, these are very important situations which can be asked in your CLAT exam, because the situation based questions are more in the paper. We'll be dealing it with tomorrow, and then we'll be moving ahead with investigation, inquiry, and trial, the general difference.
Okay,
Clear?
ma'am.
Also, you can ask, sir, like I discussed about the doubts. So if anybody has any doubt, I'll be giving you one email address. You can drop your doubts there even after the class ends, because we have a very limited time to cover the criminal laws and then the case laws also. That is why we are, I'm trying to resolve as many doubts as possible, but then still, if somebody has any doubts, or if still the concepts are not very much clear, you guys can email me to the doubts, email me the doubts on one of the email addresses I'm going to provide very soon.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Any other doubts, guys? Yes, Parvez?
Ma'am, the last example, the case where you were talking about granting of bail before the cognizance takes place. Ma'am, how is that different from an anticipatory bail?
Okay. So anticipatory bail is before arrest. And anticipatory bail can be even before the FIR is lodged. No arrest can be done before an FIR, the normal arrest, right? Suppose I have committed an offense. Just for an example, I have committed an offense and I know my arrest can take place anytime sooner and the FIR can be lodged anytime sooner. So I file an application for anticipatory bail. What is the word which is, anticipatory means what? In anticipation. I am guessing that my arrest can take place. That is why I am filing an application of bail. That can even be before the filing of FIR. Yes, pre-arrest bail. But when the arrest takes place, as soon as the FIR is filed, the police officer has the power to arrest the person. The police officer will go and arrest the person, even without warrant, because that is a cognizable case. Then what? How he'll be able to file a bail application if he will not be giving the copy of FIR? That was my question. So we'll be dealing it with tomorrow, and we'll be dealing with the concepts of anticipatory bail and bail also in detail. So this is just the broad meaning of anticipatory bail and bail.
All
Clear,
right, ma'am.
Parvez?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Let's see each other on tomorrow, and then we'll be moving ahead with Chapter 13 proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am.